And we're live with Tom Renic. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that properly. And he
You
is
got it.
an expert financial security advisor. So I'm super excited to be with him today.
Haven't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. I appreciate you guys so much.
He has a plethora of experience. So one of his greatest strengths is really his ability to convey complex financial concepts in ways that really make sense and resonate with like regular folks, right? And really, upon drawing his 25 years of experience, he's helped business owners, he's helped real estate investors, like a lot of us at home, and entrepreneurially minded individuals that really want to like simplify and eliminate the noise and just focus their attention on the fundamentals of building wealth. So, in the renowned management expert Peter Drucker, in his words, Tom really believes that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So, we're going to have a couple questions for Tom today. And if you guys back home have other questions, you just drop them in the chat. We'll throw them in there as we can because we got Tom's time is very valuable. So we got 30 minutes of that today. And I guess to start, Tom, in the beginning, we talked about, the noise. Like, what do you mean by this noise when it comes to like the fundamentals of building wealth?
Hey, Patrick. Hey, I appreciate the question, and thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be joining you here today, and connecting with you and your listeners. So again, I'm delighted to be here. When we talk about the noise, I suppose what I'm referring to there is, I think there's a lot of financial myths out there. People, without really giving it too much consideration, have, very quietly, sort of subconsciously bought into a lot of those myths. And it's not always, sometimes that can be very detrimental to their financial health. And, one of those, for example, might be, and I think most of our listeners, your listeners, can relate to this. Um, is the sense that we can always, if we need to finance something, we can go out and borrow it from someone else, borrow the capital that we need from someone else, our friendly bank or credit union. And you and I both know, and any real estate investor can attest to this, is that it's not always easy. It's not always a given. It's not always a slam dunk that we can, in fact, find someone who's ready and willing to lend us capital, right? So, it's imperative that people take steps to protect themselves and ensure that they always have access to capital. So that's just one of those things that I really, if I could put it bluntly, I try to drill into the heads and help people recognize that they need to protect themselves.
Just taking notes here because no, that was awesome. So with this noise is really like, yeah, we hear everywhere, like, hey, you could use other people's money, like find this capital. But yeah, I think you're right that it does one, it freaks a lot of people out in that, like, okay, well, what happens if they can't find that capital? And two, there's a lot of the general idea of like borrowing other people's money without necessarily the education around that. Because, like you mentioned, hey, there is a risk to that. And yeah, what happens if people don't have access to other people's money? Are they just stuck? And then what are some of the implications really with that? And I guess the other part too is really like making sure that we're getting the right information, not just this noise, and also protecting ourselves as investors and entrepreneurs. Yeah, no,
Absolutely, you got it, Patrick. You got it. And you speak to this at length in many of the books that you've written. You talk a lot about financial literacy, and ultimately we're speaking the same language there. People have to make the effort. They have to expend the energy to heighten their level of financial literacy. And I've touched on just one of those things today. alluding to, ensuring that people always have access to capital.
Yeah, that's a big one. Like if it's very difficult to protect yourself and your wealth if you don't have access to extra capital. Because hey, you got to have that capital for a rainy day. You got to have some access. We can't just be like investing all our money in. That's not really the best for risk management. Totally. Um, and I love that you mentioned that there is these fundamentals to wealth building. And Tom, with your experience and your expertise there, what are some of these like fundamentals to building wealth?
Again, very astute question, Patrick. I should mention I like to introduce myself as a reformed financial planner. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to sort of contradict myself here and refer back to the financial planning pyramid that every good financial planner has sort of introduced as a fundamental concept. If I could sort of create this pyramid before you, that foundation, that bottom foundation of the pyramid, which typically represents about 40%, that should be your foundation, your rock solid foundation of everything that you're doing from a financial standpoint. But one of the critical errors that many people make is that they fail to establish a solid financial foundation. They simply don't have that financial ark, kind of using a Noah's Ark analogy there. Instead, because they've sort of been encouraged to make their money work harder for them, that means that they rush to speculate, they rush to invest. In other words, they're moving up that financial planning pyramid, ignoring the need to establish that rock solid foundation before they do anything else. So, if I'm if I'm doing a good job of saving, I may think I'm saving, but in fact I'm actually buying something like a mutual fund where, in fact, I'm not saving, I'm investing. And when I'm investing, I am exposing myself to volatility and the potential of loss, right? So, when we talk about an emergency fund, Patrick, there's, referring to some of those myths out there, I often hear that a 3-month emergency fund should be good enough for most people. Well, we're coming out of a 3-year pandemic. I would argue that an appropriate emergency fund is 1 to 2 years of earnings. Okay, and I don't think anyone could ever be hurt by having access to capital that represents 2 years or more of earnings. Did I address your question before I started to ramble there?
I think you answered that with we're looking at defining the fundamentals of wealth there. And I know you mentioned that there is a difference between investing and saving. And I know that a lot of that, we'll call it pop culture or pop financial advice, really almost mixes the two together, right? Like you mentioned, hey, if you put money into a mutual fund, you're most likely investing into that, not necessarily saving with that. And yeah, we had that old saying of like 6 to 12 months, or sorry, 3 to 6 months of expenses will be our emergency fund. But now you're really looking at as more, hey, like after these interesting times the past 3 years, it might be better off to have 1 to 2 years of earnings, not just expenses. Because that gives you really like 1 to 2 years where, hey, if something goes wrong, you can still pay yourself and continually save, continually invest, and then not lose out on the fundamentals and the foundation of your wealth there. Now, with building wealth, I know you talked about like the foundation there. It seems like, part of that foundation is knowing the right vocabulary, learning the language of money and wealth. And you'd also mentioned like having an emergency savings fund with that. How about, I guess part of that is education, but what about like skills? Like, what are some skills that your average person could work on to add to that first foundational piece for their long-term wealth building?
Skills, absolutely. Well, in reading many of your works, Patrick, I find that we actually have so much in common, and I appreciate so much of what you're putting out there. And it really all starts, in my view, it truly does start with the right mindset, right? And yes, it starts with a high degree of financial discipline, right? I mean, number one, and this rule applies to everyone. There are no exceptions to this rule, and that is you quite simply must spend less than you earn, right? If you can't do that, then all the podcasts in the world will not help you. All the seminars in the world will not help you. You must firmly establish a sense of discipline and not spend more than you earn. But the reality is, and this is why so many people are finding themselves in hot water today, is that they simply cannot overcome that compulsion to spend. Let's face it, we live in a consumer-oriented society. We all want instant gratification. And so often the way we pay for things is to accumulate massive amounts of debt. And as you know, that throws our whole balance sheet way out of whack. So many people are so fundamentally unbalanced. It's frightening. So it's critically important to get those things right. And you also alluded to this, Patrick. You indicated in one of your books that people just want a simple system, right? A simple system that serves them well, based on some very fundamental principles. That can help them just really ease the management of their financial world, right? And one of those principles that I like to talk about is, it goes something like this, and that is you should never deplete a future financial asset to pay for a current lifestyle item, right? So, to put that in its simplest terms, if I'm setting aside money for my future, if I blow that money to buy something today, I'm going to do potentially irrevocable harm to my future financial prospects, right? So, if we choose to borrow from our future, we must have the discipline to pay ourselves back, to replenish the capital that we've spent, right?
Oh, that's huge with the financial discipline for sure. Because I love how you mentioned where, yeah, you could read all the books, you could watch all the podcasts, but if you're not applying these things and having that financial discipline, it sounds so simple, right? And it kind of is, right? It's simple in that we want you to make more than you spend. In practice though, sometimes it's not that easy for a lot of people, and it really starts with like that skill of having that financial discipline. And I like how you mentioned like managing debt is going to be huge as well, because nowadays you're missing out on a lot if you don't learn how to leverage properly, meaning how to use good debt. That being said, you also got to pay attention of when you take on that bad debt, that consumer debt that's really just going to add more to your liabilities, add more to your monthly expenses. And I think a lot of that too, where in the beginning, I thought this was all just like a just learn the skill. Like once you learn it, people have no problem doing it. And after coaching, upwards of 100 students at this point, something I did notice is that a lot of that financial discipline is very related to mindset. And I used to think that stuff was kind of woo woo. I was like, oh, yeah, like everyone talks about it, whatever. But the more I've seen this growth in people where, hey, they will build up wealth, but then all of a sudden, sometimes that financial discipline will not be there and they didn't build that foundation. So they'll build a ton of wealth and then just like eat away at it. Or they'll have the success and then create like mental roadblocks or give themselves obstacles, almost like self-sabotaging, where that's where I find it is key to have that mindset in place to make sure that, hey, like financial discipline isn't something that we look as something that's punishing us, but it's actually discipline that's going to allow us freedom later on. So I love how you mentioned that. And I love that principle where you don't want to deplete future financial assets for lifestyle. And this is huge because I made some good money in the NFT run. I think people may have known that, or they may have seen that, where we were flipping like JPEGs or pictures for good chunks of coin. And I knew a lot of friends where I was like, hey, like, this might not last forever. We should probably take some of this cash and put in some real assets. And I had friends that were like, oh no, it's gonna keep going up. We're gonna make millions of dollars. And I was like, hey, well, there's other options. Like we could sell this, buy a house, you get a HELOC on it. There's other means than just selling these pictures, basically. And of course, it was a little bit of a bull run. Now a lot of those pictures are worthless. And if people had this foundational principle, right? Just, okay, we make some money, let's put that away. It'll pay us in the future, as opposed to just spending it on Rolexes, vacations, whatever it was. It would made a big difference in especially long-term wealth building. So I find that awesome. Like, yeah, you definitely don't want to deplete your assets just for lifestyle. And I get it. It's hard. Like social media is really pushing a lot of that fancy lifestyle, private jets. It's all accessible to everyone, da da da. But in reality, a lot of that is marketing. And I really do my best to show the transparent side of, okay, how you actually start from nothing, build that way up. But also, once you get to a certain level, like how are you making these expenses that are still going to provide you the life that you want, but also not eat away at your capital? And now I guess we'll go into a little bit more advanced stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Anything else you want to add to that, or?
Oh, yeah. You hit the nail on the head, Patrick. Ultimately, another one of those foundational questions is, of all of the capital that flows through your hands, how much of that are you actually holding on to? You look at the typical, pro athlete, many of them are bankrupt within a few years of retirement, right? They've basically squandered all of their wealth. So, but having said that, Patrick, I don't want to lead you to believe that I'm sort of a penny pinching bookkeeper, frowning upon people spending and enjoying their life, enjoying the things that bring them joy. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm just really what I'm talking about is, people need to have systems in place that allow them to have a balanced personal financial economy, right? It's if you're taking care of your future financial self, that allows you to spend and enjoy your money that much more freely, right? But if there's a sense that you're maybe living a lifestyle that doesn't allow you to save as much as you should be, then there's always going to be that little bit of a nagging feeling that that's not going to quite allow you to enjoy as much as you'd like.
That's a big one, where it's not all just about being frugal, like you mentioned, but really even just reducing kind of that anxiety that people have when they know they're spending money when they probably shouldn't. And I've seen it also where it's like people build this wealth and they end up being scared to spend it. Like I know a couple clients where, they're wealthy already. It's like awesome, you can enjoy that money. And then a lot of the coaching becomes, they tell me they're afraid to spend that money. And then we go through kind of this checklist where it's like, hey, are you spending it on liabilities? Yes, no. They're like, oh yeah, I guess it is a liability. I'm like, cool. Now, can you afford to spend on that liability? And they're like, yeah, actually we can. I was like, okay, well, don't feel bad about it. It's really if you spend on a liability that you can't afford, or even
Exactly.
an investment that you can't afford, if you can't afford it, it's going to cause you that anxiety. Or maybe it doesn't, but in the future, it's going to eat away at your financial assets. So that's just having that peace of mind. I always put a little bit of a value on peace of mind, probably more of a value on peace of mind. Hard to measure, but being able to, sleep well at night, knowing your investments are fine and your financial
Yes.
situation is great, like that has value. And people tend to forget about that, even later on
Oh
in the
yeah.
future stages, right?
Piece of man. You're preaching to the converted here, Patrick. Do you think that there would be that there are a lot of people in this world today who would welcome more financial peace of mind? I mean, obviously, the answer is of course there is, right? We've been through 18 months of rapidly rising interest rates. Um, in many cases, people's mortgage payments have doubled. They're carrying that debt that we spoke of. A lot of people are hurting, and I really empathize with those folks. And so we should never underestimate the value of that peace of mind. Absolutely.
It goes very far, and yeah, you don't have to look back too much in time to really see the value of that. And yeah, I guess now, Tom, we could jump into a little bit more advanced concept. Maybe some of the watchers at home have heard about this, maybe some haven't. But I know that you're an advocate of privatized banking, aka the infinite banking concept. And this has been
Yeah.
getting a lot of traction in Canada. Like I'm getting more students ask me about it. I even had another student that he moved from Philippines, lived in South America, started their own like small hotel B&V chain there, and then got here to Canada. And he's a big advocate of this infinite banking concept. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, it's thank you, Patrick. It kind of all started with this uh, groundbreaking work by Nelson Nash. Nelson Nash put out this workbook, Becoming Your Own Banker, Unlock the Infinite Banking Concept. He put that out more than 20 years ago, 20 to 30 years ago. And Nelson really encouraged people to, get back to the basics, some of the things that we've talked about. Ultimately, in its purest, simplest form, infinite banking is really nothing more than storing your capital in a safe, protected place over which you have complete control, complete control, complete access, complete use. And it means dipping into that. You're encouraged to dip into it from time to time for lifestyle expenses or investment opportunities. And it provides that mechanism that we spoke of earlier. It provides that system to put your money to work and deploy it, and then return it back to your warehouse of wealth, back to, I like to refer to it as your private reserve or your wealth maximization account. So it's simply a matter of, it establishes a platform and basically encourages people to be disciplined and methodical in how they deploy their savings.
Got it. Okay, so it's really a safe place where it's an account that you could put money into that you have control, not another institution, and you can still use that for whether it's lifestyle, whether it's for investments, or whether just build it up into that account.
Absolutely. I mean, has anyone ever been harmed, Patrick, by having access to a lot of capital?
Hopefully not. But the example, probably the counter example, would probably be someone winning the lottery, and then usually they lose their money. But with education, if they have a lot of capital, usually they don't screw it up. I think that education is the key for sure.
So, I'm gonna reword that question. Are there real estate investors out there who, could potentially acquire more properties by having access to more capital? Yeah, I would
Oh,
say so.
100%. Yeah, totally. And yeah, no, I guess that leads to our next question, which is, yeah, how can aspiring real estate investors use this infinite banking concept to actually reach their goals?
That's a great question. It's a great question. So, we all have to store out if we are in fact spending less than we earn, right? We've got something to put away for a future project or a future investment. We have to store it somewhere, right? So so whatever that account looks like, we want to be very deliberate in choosing an account that sort of checks all of the proverbial boxes, that will do all of the things that we want it to do, right? Um, from a real estate investor standpoint, um, you know, um, uh, access to capital or credit is huge. So I would want to know that I have absolute liquidity use and control of the funds I've stored in my account. I would want to store those dollars in a tax preferred sort of environment where I don't have to pay tax on any earnings, right? I would want to be able to collateralize that account so that I could put those dollars to work and still allow my capital to continue growing uninterrupted. So, again, real estate investors will appreciate this concept of, building equity in an asset and then turning around and using that asset, our equity in that asset, as security to do something else. It's all about getting maximum use out of your dollars, putting them to use in several places at the same time. And it's that heightened level of activity, that velocity of money that will ultimately allow you to create more wealth.
Oh, I love that. It's that velocity of money that a lot of investors really need, right? Especially in the beginning, where, if you could build up a portfolio quickly, put that money to use, get it out, keep that liquidity, put into the next deal, well, you could really have focus for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years and then still get the results. And now, once you build that portfolio, you can let the compounding effect grow with you while still having access to that money that you put away. So I love that piece, especially where liquidity has kind of become an issue recently with a lot of investors where,
Yes.
before I could go out there, have my list of people, be like, hey, we got this deal, and I would get, my financing, find a money partner, as little as like a few hours. Now it's taking a little bit more time. And even with like a list of people that I work closely with, they're a little bit tighter on cash. There's a lot of fear in the market. People want to hold on to their cash a little bit more as opposed to earlier, even just a year or two, people are deploying all that cash. So I think, yeah, finding more ways for aspiring investors to solve this liquidity problem is going to be key for them, especially if they want to grow and get that freedom sooner than later.
Without question, Patrick, on the flip side of these rapidly rising interest rates that we've seen over the last 18 months or so, that also means, to some extent, that people are content to happily accept those risk-free returns, right? If they can get 5+% by basically keeping their funds at the bank, why would they speculate on something that maybe is a little iffy? Why would they? So in other words, these higher rates of return that are available to them on their safe money, it allows people to be more selective in how they deploy their capital, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm sure this is something that you discuss with your students. You have to be selective in choosing the right property, right? And the same holds true in how we spend our money and how we deploy our capital. And at the same time, again, within a an infinite banking type of policy, if I know that I am reliably earning on a risk-free basis, between 4 and 5%, without having to pay tax on those earnings year after year after year, guaranteed, knowing that my dollars are growing every single day, I can afford to be selective, right? Um, the last thing I'll say on this is, when you have liquidity, when you have capital that is ready to deploy, opportunities will search you out, right? You cannot help but attract opportunities if you've got a pool of capital that you're ready to do something with, right? The flip side often is that sometimes people will come across a great opportunity, but they have no capital and no ability to take advantage of it, right? I would. So what we're talking about here again is a system that guarantees folks that investors will always have access to capital and the ability to respond and take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves.
Yeah, that's huge just because that optionality allows for especially new investors to not just jump into deals just because it's all they have access to. It really allows them to pick and choose. And I think you mentioned earlier, like what investor is going to complain if they have other means to financing deals, other means to move the liquidity that they have access to. And it's really just setting themselves up so that they can still grow while at the same time be able to plan for the future, really. Because yeah, I mean, in my early days as an investor, I missed out on a ton of opportunities because I put all of my money into one opportunity and then I'm missing out on these other ones. Now, I didn't have all the other options that are now available or that I'm even aware of just because I didn't have the education back then. But as I
Yes.
continue to grow here, and even some of the people back watching from home, like that there's more than just one way to invest, right? There's more than just one way to move money out of your accounts, whether it's going to be through the infinite banking concept or whether it's, using private capital or whether it's, even starting an active business to support your investments. There's all these different ways, and it doesn't hurt to just educate yourself on these other aspects that can be tools in our tool belt for building wealth. So no, it's been awesome
Yeah.
chat, Tom. And I guess last thing before we let you go there, how can people reach out to you, Tom? How can whether they're real estate investors or aspiring entrepreneurs or just people that want to take care of their wealth, where can they reach out to you? And what's the best way that they can contact you?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Man, our half hour or 40 minutes or so has flown by here. Time
Mhm.
flies when you're having fun. I really
Totally.
hope we can do this again and maybe drill a little deeper. So, I'd be delighted to take a call, have a coffee, jump on a Zoom call with any of your listeners and students. And I'm going to put a plug in here for our collective volunteering effort at the Winnipeg Harvest coming up within what is that, a couple of weeks away?
Yeah, so what Tom's mentioning there is we're going to be going to Winnipeg Harvest to do some volunteering, and that will be on December 9th. So it's free. It's a great place to network, connect with other people, and it's a little bit less intimidating, I find, because, it can be intimidating sometimes to go into these big rooms and do networking. But hey, if we're doing some volunteering, doing a little bit of work, taking care of our community, and we're side by side and the conversation comes up, I find that it's a lot less intimidating for people. So yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone there.
Absolutely. So, I'm happy if someone would like to have a casual conversation over a beverage once we've done our good deeds for the day. Otherwise, I'm sure through you, Patrick, you can you'd be able to share my contact information. Easiest way: tom.renic@gmail.com.
Awesome, and we'll put Tom's Facebook and that email that he mentioned in the description
Yeah,
of this video. So yeah, if you guys want to reach out to him, be a great connection to make, especially if you're serious about building wealth and also finding other creative solutions to your investing problems. So yeah, thanks so much, Tom. It was a pleasure speaking to you today. And then yeah, we'd love to have you on. We can go even deeper on some concepts that we didn't really get too much time to touch upon today, but I think today was a great overview of like, hey, how do we build this fundamentals to wealth? What can we do to make sure that we're building a foundation and also filtering out the noise of, okay, this is good info, this is maybe not so great info for our financial future, and a little bit of an introduction to the power of the infinite banking system, especially for aspiring real estate investors. So again, thanks so much, Tom. That was a great chat, and hope everyone at home listening got a ton of value. I took some notes, which my green screen is just using to make me invisible, but I always like to take notes here. So again, you guys can reach out to Tom, whether it's on Facebook or email there. And then again, once we put this video live, it's going to be in the description. So you guys are awesome. Thanks so much for watching. And again, make sure to hit that
thanks,
like and
Patrick.
subscribe button. And thank you so much, Tom. You're great.
Take care.
Take care. Sweet.
Well, that was fun.
Oh, it was amazing. It's good stuff.
The knowledge I had with real estate wasn't that great, and that's when I knew I needed a mentor to guide me through the steps of minimizing my mistakes and obtaining property. It kept me accountable with the limited time I had after the long hours at work. It taught me things I wouldn't have learned without a mentor.
Thank you to Patrick. Big help me with pretty much everything ever since I started. So big shout out to Patrick and Alliance.
Nice. Yeah, Nick's an action taker, so we can help guide you, but you still got to do work, and Nick is a testimonial for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Patrick, for this program. It changed my life. It changed my mindset. It changed everything. That was the best six weeks of my life.
I just want to give a shout out to my man Patrick. Just honestly been one of the best teachers that I've ever had.
It's a very informative course. Patrick works with you one-on-one, so if there's any questions or anything you might be doubting or you're uncertain of, he'll definitely be there to help. Honestly, I highly suggest this course. It's taught me a lot through my journey.